Emma Thompson sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair at the airport, watching the departure board change again. Her flight to Bath was now delayed by 3 hours. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything that had gone wrong in her life pressing down on her shoulders. The divorce papers in her briefcase seemed to burn through the leather. David had signed them 2 weeks ago, and now it was her turn. 32 years old and starting over completely. The job that once excited her now felt like a cage every morning. She woke up dreading another day of helping wealthy clients avoid paying taxes while regular people struggled to make ends meet. She had booked this trip to Bath hoping that getting away from London would help her think clearly. Maybe the quiet countryside would give her some peace. Maybe she could figure out what to do with the rest of her life. When her flight finally took off, Emma stared out the window at the lights below. Each light represented someone's home, someone's family, someone's happiness. She wondered if she would ever feel like she belonged anywhere again. The small hotel in Bath looked charming from the outside. Ivy covered the old stone walls, and warm light glowed from the windows. Emma dragged her heavy suitcase through the front door, her high heels clicking loudly on the polished wooden floor. The young man behind the reception desk looked as tired as she felt. His name tag read James, and he had dark circles under his eyes. The phone was ringing constantly, and a small pile of complaint forms sat next to his computer. "Sorry for the wait, Miss Thompson," James said, barely looking up as he handed her a keycard. "Room 247. Lift is just round the corner, but it's quite slow. You might want to take the stairs." Emma thanked him and made her way down the narrow hallway. The walls were covered with old photographs of Bath, the Roman baths, the Royal Crescent, street scenes from decades past. Her suitcase bumped against the walls as she navigated the tight space. Room 247 was at the end of the hall. Emma slid the keycard into the lock and waited for the green light. The mechanism clicked, and she pushed the door open, expecting to find a simple hotel room with a bed, a desk, and maybe a small television. Instead, she stepped into someone's entire world. Photographs covered every surface of the room. Black and white pictures showed a young couple dancing at what looked like a wedding from the 1960s. There were photos of children playing in gardens, blowing out birthday candles, and graduating from school. More recent pictures showed an elderly woman with kind eyes and silver hair, standing next to paintings in what looked like art galleries. Letters were spread across a small wooden desk near the window. Some were in neat handwriting. Others looked hastily written. Art supplies filled one corner of the room. Brushes, tubes of paint, pencils, and sketchbooks. A half-finished canvas sat on an easel, showing a beautiful sunset over green rolling hills. The colors were so vivid that Emma could almost feel the warmth of that painted sun. Emma knew she should leave immediately. This was clearly someone else's room, and she was invading their privacy. She should call the front desk and explain the mistake. But something about the room felt different from any place she had ever been. It felt alive, full of love and memories and dreams. It felt like the kind of home she had always wanted but never known how to create. On the desk, one letter lay open. Emma could see the careful handwriting from where she stood. She knew it was wrong to read someone else's private thoughts, but her feet seemed to move on their own, carrying her closer to the desk. The letter was dated just 3 days ago. At the top, in beautiful script, someone had written to the girl, "I was at 20. Emma's hands trembled as she picked up the letter. She told herself she would read just the first line and then put it down. Just one line. "To the girl I was at 20. You are braver than you know. And the pain you feel today will become your greatest strength tomorrow." The words hit Emma like A physical force. Tears filled her eyes so quickly that the writing became blurry. She had to blink several times to clear her vision. When was the last time someone had told her she was brave? When was the last time anyone had suggested that her pain might have a purpose? For months, everyone had been telling her to move on and stay positive and focus on the future. But no one had acknowledged that what she was going through was genuinely difficult. No one had told her that it was okay to hurt, and that hurting didn't make her weak. Emma sank into the chair by the desk, still holding the letter. Outside the window, the lights of Bath twinkled in the darkness. She could hear the distant sound of church bells and the quiet murmur of people walking past on the street below. For the first time in months, Emma felt something other than emptiness. She felt curious. Emma sat in the chair by the desk, holding the first letter in her trembling hands. The signature at the bottom read Margaret in the same careful handwriting. The date showed it was written just 2 days ago. This wasn't an old letter forgotten by a previous guest. Someone named Margaret was currently staying in this room, and Emma was reading her most private thoughts. She should put the letter down and leave. She knew this was wrong. But something about the words pulled at her heart, like a magnet. The letter spoke directly to feelings she had carried for years, but never put into words. Emma's eyes moved to the other letters scattered across the desk. They were all addressed to different versions of Margaret herself. Some said to the teenager, "I was," while others began with "To the woman, I will be at 80. It seemed like Margaret wrote to herself regularly, like having a conversation with all the different people she had been and would become. Unable to resist, Emma picked up another letter. This one was addressed to the young mother I was at 30. She opened it carefully and read the neat handwriting. "Stop worrying so much about being perfect. You spend too much time cleaning the house and not enough time playing with the children. They will not remember if the kitchen was spotless. They will remember if you laughed with them, if you read them stories, if you danced with them in the living room when it rained. Your love matters more than your housework. Trust yourself. You are doing better than you think." Emma felt her chest tighten. She remembered her own mother, always stressed about keeping everything perfect, never seeming to enjoy the simple moments. How different might her childhood have been if her mother had read words like these. She reached for another letter. "To myself at 50. Yes. It is scary to start painting again after all these years. You have not held a brush since art class in school. You think you are too old, too out of practice, too foolish to begin again. But dreams do not have expiration dates. The desire to create something beautiful has been sleeping inside you, not dead. Wake it up. Buy the paints. Set up the easel. Make terrible paintings at first. Make wonderful paintings later. But make something. The world needs what only you can create." Emma looked round the room at all the art supplies and paintings. Margaret had clearly taken her own advice. The canvases showed skill that came from years of practice, but also joy that came from following a dream regardless of age or circumstances. Letter after letter revealed pieces of Margaret's story. She had been married young to a man named Thomas. They had been deeply in love, dancing in their small apartment kitchen, dreaming of growing old together. But Thomas had died in a car accident when Margaret was only 35, leaving her alone with 3 young children. The letters from that time period were different. They were full of grief and fear and exhaustion. "To the widow I am today, I know you want to stay in bed and never face the world again. I know you feel like you cannot possibly raise these children alone, but you are stronger than you. No, take it one day at a time. 1 hour at a time if you need to. Ask for help when you need it. Cry when you need to. But keep going. Your children need you, and someday you will be glad you did not give up." Emma found herself sitting on the edge of the hotel bed, reading letter after letter as the evening grew darker outside. Margaret had worked 2 jobs to support her family, cleaning houses during the day and working at a factory at night. She had struggled with loneliness and money troubles. There were letters about choosing between buying groceries and paying the electric bill. Letters about feeling guilty for being tired. For sometimes losing her patience with the children. For wondering if she was ruining their lives by not being able to provide more. But through all the difficult times, the letters showed something remarkable. Margaret had learned to be incredibly kind to herself. When she made mistakes, she wrote letters of forgiveness. When she felt scared, she wrote letters of encouragement. When she achieved small victories, like her youngest child learning to read, or saving enough money for a family vacation, she wrote letters of celebration. Emma could see in the handwriting itself how Margaret had grown over the years. The early letters after her husband's death were shaky and desperate. The middle letters showed more confidence. The recent letters were written with the steady hand of someone who had learned to trust herself. Completely, to the woman I am at. 73. One recent letter began. You have lived through more than you ever thought possible. You have raised 3 wonderful children who are now raising wonderful children of their own. You have built a career helping other single mothers find jobs and childcare. You have finally returned to painting, and your art hangs in galleries across England. Most importantly, you have learned to be your own best friend. You speak to yourself with kindness. You forgive your mistakes. You celebrate your victories, no matter how small. This is the greatest gift you could have given yourself, Emma whispered to the quiet room. I wish I could write to myself like this. I wish I knew how to be kind to the person looking back at me in the mirror. Outside the window, the English countryside stretched peacefully under the evening sky. For the first time in months, Emma felt something other than sadness flowing through her. She felt curiosity about what her own letters might say. Emma was completely lost in Margaret's world of letters when she heard a sound that made her freeze, the electronic beep of a keycard sliding into the door lock. Her heart started beating so fast she could hear it in her ears. The door handle turned slowly, and Emma jumped up from the bed so quickly that several letters scattered to the floor. Her face turned bright red as she realized how terrible this looked. She was a complete stranger, sitting in someone else's hotel room, reading their most private thoughts. The door opened, and Emma found herself face to face with a woman in her 70s. She had beautiful silver hair pulled back in a loose bun, and her clothes were covered in small spots of paint. But what struck Emma most were her eyes. They were the kindest eyes she had ever seen, with tiny wrinkles round them that showed this was a person who smiled often. Emma's words tumbled out in a rush. Oh my goodness, I am so sorry. The desk clerk gave me the wrong keycard, and I should have left immediately when I realized this was your room. But I saw your letters, and they were so beautiful. And I started reading them, which was completely wrong of me. I invaded your privacy, and I feel terrible about it. Emma expected anger. She expected shouting. She expected the woman to call hotel security and have her thrown out instead. The woman in the doorway smiled warmly, as if finding a stranger in her room reading her personal letters was the most natural thing in the world. Well, this is certainly a first, the woman chuckled, setting down a small bag of art supplies near the door. In all my years of travel, no one has ever been so interested in my letters that they forgot to leave. Please, dear, do not look so frightened. You look like you have seen a ghost. Emma tried to apologize again, but the woman held up a gentle hand to stop her. I am Margaret Wilson, she said, extending her hand with a smile. And you are Emma Thompson, Emma replied, shaking Margaret's hand and feeling surprised by how warm and steady it was. I am absolutely mortified. I cannot believe I invaded your privacy like this. Nonsense, Margaret said, waving her hand as if brushing away Emma's embarrassment. If my letters spoke to you enough to keep you here, then perhaps there was a reason for this mix-up. Now, would you be so kind as to put the kettle on? I think we both could use some tea. Emma looked round the room and spotted a small electric kettle on a table near the window. Her hands were still shaking slightly as she filled it with water and plugged it in. Margaret moved round the room with easy familiarity, clearing letters from the small table and setting out to delicate china cups that she had apparently brought from home. I always travel with my own teacups, Margaret explained, noticing Emma's curious look. Hotel cups never feel quite right, do they? Tea tastes better when it is served with a bit of beauty. As they waited for the water to boil, Margaret gestured for Emma to sit in the comfortable chair by the window while she settled on the edge of the bed. The room felt different now that Margaret was in it. It felt complete, like a puzzle with its missing piece finally found. So, Emma Thompson, Margaret said, "What brings you to Bath? And please, do not spend any more time apologizing. I can see in your eyes that you are carrying enough guilt about other things. You do not need to add this small mistake to your burden." Something about Margaret's gentle tone and understanding words broke down the walls Emma had built round her feelings. Before she knew it, she was telling this stranger everything. She talked about her marriage to David, how they had started out so happy but slowly grew apart as work consumed more and more of their lives. She described the divorce papers sitting in her briefcase, and how signing them felt like admitting she had failed at the most important thing in her life. "I used to love painting," Emma admitted, looking at the art supplies scattered round the room. "When I was young, I dreamed of being an artist. I would spend hours drawing and painting, completely lost in creating something beautiful, but everyone told me it was not practical. My parents said I needed a real career that would pay the bills, so I became a lawyer." Emma's voice grew quieter as she continued. "Now I spend my days in a grey office in London, helping wealthy people find ways to avoid paying taxes while ordinary families struggle to make ends meet. I cannot remember the last time I felt truly happy or excited about anything. I feel like I have lost myself completely." Margaret listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or making a soft sound of understanding. She did not offer quick solutions or tell Emma that everything would be fine. She simply listened with her whole attention, as if Emma's story was the most important thing in the world. When Emma finished speaking, Margaret was quiet for a long moment. The kettle had boiled, and she poured hot water over tea bags in their cups, the steam rising between them like a bridge. "You know, Emma," Margaret said finally, "I started writing those letters after my husband Thomas died. I was 45 years old, suddenly alone with 3 teenagers, and I felt like my life was completely over. The letters helped me remember something important. I was still becoming someone every day. We get to choose who we want to be." Emma woke up the next morning feeling different than she had in months. The sunlight streaming through the hotel room curtains seemed brighter, and for the first time in weeks, she did not immediately feel the heavy weight of sadness pressing down on her chest. She had slept better than she had since before the divorce papers arrived. She was getting dressed when she heard a soft knock on her door. When she opened it, Margaret stood in the hallway holding a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with a simple white ribbon. "Good morning, dear," Margaret said with her warm smile. "I have been thinking about our conversation last night, and I have a proposal for you." Emma invited Margaret into her room and offered her the chair by the window. Margaret placed the package on the small table between them and looked at Emma with those kind eyes that seemed to see straight into her soul. "I stayed awake for quite a while after you left my room," Margaret said. "I kept thinking about what you said, about wishing you could write to yourself the way I do, and then I realized something. You can." Margaret pushed the wrapped package toward Emma. "Open it, please." Emma's fingers fumbled slightly with the ribbon. Inside the brown paper was the most beautiful leather journal she had ever seen. It was deep burgundy color with gold edges on the pages, and it felt substantial in her hands. The leather was soft and worn, as if it had been loved for many years. "This journal belonged to my mother," Margaret explained. "She gave it to me when I was about your age, going through my own difficult time. I filled every page with my thoughts and dreams and fears. When I finished it, I bought a new one, then another after that. I have been writing to myself for nearly 30 years. Now." Emma opened the journal and saw that all the pages were completely blank, waiting for her words. "I want you to make me a promise," Margaret continued, leaning forward slightly. "For the next 30 days, write one letter each day. It can be to your past self, your future self, or the person you are right now. Do not think too hard about what to write. Do not worry about grammar or spelling or saying the right thing. Just write from your heart." Emma held the journal in her hands, feeling the weight of it. It seemed both light and heavy at the same time. Light because it was just paper and leather, but heavy because of what Margaret was asking her to do. "I do not know if I'm brave enough for this," Emma said softly, running her fingers over the smooth leather cover. "What if I do not know what to say to myself? What if I write terrible things?" Margaret reached over and placed her weathered hand gently on top of Emma's younger one. "Bravery is not about not being scared, dear. Bravery is about doing something important even when you are scared, and being kind to yourself is one of the most important things you will ever do." Emma looked into Margaret's eyes and saw such confidence there, such belief that she could do this difficult thing. No one had looked at her with that kind of faith in a very long time. "All right," Emma said, surprising herself. "I will try." "Wonderful," Margaret said, clapping her hands together softly. "Now, I have another suggestion. Why do not you extend your stay in Bath for a week? Give yourself time to settle into this new practice without the pressures of London calling you back too soon." Emma had planned to return to London the next day, but the thought of going back to her empty apartment and demanding job made her stomach tighten with anxiety. A week in Bath suddenly sounded like exactly what she needed. That afternoon, Emma changed her train ticket and settled in for a longer stay. Every morning, she and Margaret met for a breakfast in the hotel dining room. Margaret had a way of making ordinary moments feel special. She would point out how the morning light fell across their table, or comment on the cheerful pattern of the waitress's dress, or share a funny story about something she had seen while walking through town. After breakfast, Margaret would take Emma exploring. They visited small art galleries where local artists displayed their paintings. Margaret introduced Emma to Henry, the owner of a tiny bookshop who recommended poetry collections and novels about people finding their way in life. They walked through the Royal Crescent and sat in the parks, watching children play and couples walk hand in hand. "You see that couple over there?" Margaret would say, nodding toward an elderly pair feeding ducks by the pond. "They have been married for 57 years. I met them yesterday. She told me they still hold hands every morning when they wake up." And then Margaret would smile in a way that made Emma believe that kind of lasting love was possible. Each evening, Emma would return to her room and write in the journal. The first few letters were awkward and full of doubt, but gradually her words became more honest and gentle. On her last day in Bath, Emma wrote her 7th letter. To the woman I am becoming. Thank you for being patient with the woman I am today. Thank you for not giving up on us. I think we are going to be okay. When it was time to say goodbye, Margaret hugged Emma tightly at the train station. This is just the beginning, Margaret said. Promise me you will keep writing, even when you get back to London and life gets busy again. Emma promised, though part of her wondered if she could really keep such a commitment. But as her train pulled away from Bath and she watched the countryside roll past her window, she felt something she had not felt in years. She felt hope. Emma stood in the familiar hallway of the small hotel in Bath, her heart beating with excitement and nervousness. 6 months had passed since she first walked down this corridor and accidentally entered. Margaret's room, 6 months since her life, had changed completely. She carried a leather bag in her hands, the same burgundy journal that Margaret had given her, now filled from cover to cover with her own handwriting. 180 letters to herself. 1 letter for every single day since she had left Bath with a promise to keep writing. Emma knocked softly on the door of room 247. She heard footsteps inside, and then the door opened to reveal Margaret's face breaking into the most beautiful smile. Emma, Margaret exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with joy. Oh, my dear, you look absolutely wonderful, and Emma did look different. Her hair was longer now and had natural waves instead of the tight professional style she used to wear. Her clothes were softer, more colorful, but the biggest change was in her eyes. They were bright and alive in a way they had not been for years. Margaret, Emma said, stepping into the familiar room that felt like coming home. I have so much to tell you. Emma handed Margaret the completed journal. Heavy now with all the words she had written to herself over the past 6 months. Margaret held it carefully, as if she were holding something precious. Every single day, Margaret asked, running her fingers over the worn leather cover. Every single day, Emma confirmed. Even on the days when I did not want to, even on the days when I could only write 1 sentence, I kept my promise. Margaret gestured for Emma to sit in the chair by the window while she settled on the bed. Just as they had done 6 months ago, the art supplies were still scattered round the room, and there were new paintings on the easel. But Emma noticed something else. A large stack of typed papers sat neatly on the desk. I have news too, Margaret said, following Emma's gaze to the desk. I finally finished my novel. I have been working on it for 3 years, always starting and stopping, never quite believing I could really complete it. But after our time together, I found the courage to finish it. What is it about? Emma asked, genuinely curious. Margaret's cheeks turned slightly pink. It is about a young woman who gets lost in life and finds herself again through the kindness of an unexpected friend. I hope you do not mind that our meeting inspired me. Emma felt tears starting to form in her eyes, but they were happy tears. I am honored to be part of your story. They spent the next hour sitting together as the afternoon sun streamed through the windows. Emma told Margaret about everything that had changed in her life. Through the daily letters, she had found the courage to leave her job at the big law firm. It had been scary to give up the security and the high salary, but she could not continue helping wealthy people avoid their responsibilities while regular families struggled. I took a position at a legal aid clinic in London, Emma explained. I help families who cannot afford lawyers. Yesterday, I helped a single mother keep her apartment. Last week, I helped an elderly man get the medical care he needed. The work is harder and the pay is much less, but I wake up every morning excited to go to work. Margaret listened with the same complete attention she had given Emma 6 months ago, nodding and smiling at all the right moments. And I started painting again, Emma continued. Just small watercolors at first. I was so scared that I had forgotten how, or that I was never really good at it in the first place. But I kept painting anyway. Now my apartment is full of color. I have canvases everywhere. My friends say it looks like an art studio instead of a home. How wonderful, Margaret said. Do you sell your paintings? Em laughed. I had my first art show last month at a small gallery near my apartment. I only sold 3 paintings, but people seemed to really connect with my work. The gallery owner wants me to have another show in the spring. As the sun began to set outside the window, they opened Emma's journal together. Margaret read some of the early letters aloud. They were full of pain and confusion and doubt. Emma had written about missing David, about feeling like a failure, about not knowing who she was, without her marriage or her high-paying job. But as they read through the months, the letters changed. They became more hopeful, more accepting, more loving. Emma had learned to forgive herself for her mistakes. She had learned to celebrate small victories. She had learned to speak to herself the way she would speak to a dear friend. Listen to this one. Margaret said, reading from a letter Emma had written just 2 weeks ago. To the woman I was 6 months ago. You were so brave to start this journey, even when you could not see where it would lead. Thank you for not giving up on us. Look how far we have come. Emma felt a warm glow spread through her chest as she heard her own words read back to her. You know what I have learned, Emma said as the sun set completely outside the window. Home is not a place. It is not even a person. Home is being comfortable with who you are, wherever you are. Margaret smiled and squeezed Emma's hand gently. And now you can help others find their way home too. The end.